On the night of January 7th, 1943, an old man lay still on a narrow bed in a small room on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker. Before we go any further into this story, if you want a brand new American mystery every single night, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. The room number was 3327. The room was simple. The carpet was thin and the color of dust. A single lamp burned on the nightstand, casting soft yellow light across the wallpaper. The old man's name was Nikola Tesla. He was 86 years old. His suit hung on him like it was draped over a wire frame. His hair was thin and white and combed back from a high forehead. His hands, long and pale, rested at his sides. They were the hands of a piano player, or maybe a surgeon, though they had been neither. Those hands had drawn the future. Those hands had shaped the way the modern world hummed and spun and lit itself up at night. Outside the window, the city of New York stretched out in a quilt of soft gold lights and snow-dusted rooftops. The skyline glittered like something he himself had imagined into being, and in many ways he had. The current that lit those windows, the motors that turned in basements all over Manhattan, the radio waves humming invisibly through the cold winter air. All of it traced back, in one way or another, to the quiet man in room 3327. He had asked the staff to leave a sign on his door. Do not disturb. He had been very firm about it. He often slept little. He often worked through the night, scratching notes onto hotel stationery, feeding pigeons on the windowsill, speaking softly to himself in a Serbian accent that had never quite faded after 60 years in America. The maids knew not to bother him. The bellhops knew his habits. The front desk kept his secrets. So the sign stayed on the door, and the room stayed quiet, and the snow kept falling on the streets 33 stories below. Inside that small room, scattered across the desk and stacked in neat piles on the floor, were his papers. Notebooks bound in worn leather. Diagrams sketched in pencil and ink. Letters from old friends, old rivals, old governments. Blueprints for machines that had not yet been built. Designs for machines that, according to the man himself, had already been built and tested in secret, behind locked doors, in workshops the world had forgotten about. He had spoken often of these inventions in his final years. He spoke of a beam of energy that could travel hundreds of miles without wires. He spoke of a way to send power through the very ground itself, free of charge, to every home on Earth. He spoke of weapons so strange and so terrible that they would end all war by making war impossible. Some called him a dreamer. Some called him a fraud. A few, the quiet few, called him the most dangerous mind alive. And on that snowy January night, that mind went still. Nobody heard him pass. No bell rang. No nurse stood at his bedside. There was only the soft hum of the radiator and the distant sound of traffic and the slow whisper of snow against the glass. He simply closed his eyes. His chest rose. His chest fell. And then it did not rise again. He was found 2 days later by a maid who had grown worried about the sign that never came down. What happened next is where the story turns strange. Within hours of his body being discovered, before his nephew could be reached, before any funeral arrangements could be made, before the public even knew the great inventor was gone, men in dark suits arrived at the Hotel New Yorker. They did not announce themselves to the press. They did not speak to the family. They went straight to room 3327. They went straight to the safe in the basement where Tesla kept his most private papers. And they took everything, every notebook, every diagram, every letter, every sealed envelope, every black trunk, and every brown box. Gone before the man's body had even gone cold on the slab, who sent them what they were looking for. What they found, and what they kept, and what they may have hidden away in a warehouse somewhere that no civilian has ever seen. These are the questions that have haunted Tesla's legacy for more than 80 years. And tonight, in the quiet hours, we are going to sit with those questions. We are going to walk slowly through a story that has no clean ending. We are going to step into room 3327 together, and we are going to see what we can see. New York City in the winter of 1943 wore a coat of soot and snow. The war was on, and the city moved with a strange kind of hush beneath all its noise. Steel rationing had quieted the cranes. Gold stars hung in apartment windows where sons had gone off to fight. The street lamps were dimmed at night for fear of submarines watching from the dark Atlantic. Above it all rose a forest of stone and steel, a city of elevators and radio waves and rolling yellow cabs that puffed white smoke into the cold. In the middle of Manhattan, on the corner of 33rd Street and 7th Avenue, stood the Hotel New Yorker. It was a tall slab of brick and limestone, 43 stories climbing into the gray sky like a great stone book stood on its end. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and brass elevator doors that opened with a soft chime. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Men in long wool coats and snap-brim hats stamped slush from their shoes. Women in seamed stockings hurried past the cigar stand. A doorman in a gold-trimmed cap held the brass-handled door for every guest, his breath puffing white into the January cold. The air outside smelled of coal smoke and roasted chestnuts. Trolleys rattled along their tracks. Newsboys shouted headlines about North Africa and the Pacific. Yellow taxis honked. The Empire State Building stood just 2 blocks east, its silver spire vanishing into the low clouds. And somewhere up on the 33rd floor of the New Yorker, in a small 2-room suite labeled 3327, an old man was keeping a promise to a bird. His name was Nikola Tesla. He was 86 years old. His suit was clean but worn thin at the elbows, and his stiff white collar sat loose on a neck that had grown thinner with the years. His hair had gone the color of winter ash. His eyes were a soft, faded blue, the kind that seem to look at something far away even when they are looking right at you. He stood over 6 feet tall, and yet he weighed almost nothing now, like a candle that has burned most of the way down. The room around him was simple. A narrow bed against one wall, a wooden writing desk by the window, stacked with notebooks and loose papers, a radiator that hissed and clanked, a single lamp throwing warm yellow light across the carpet. The wallpaper was a quiet rose pattern, faded by sun and years. From the window, he could look out across the rooftops of Midtown, where snow gathered on water towers and chimneys breathed slow gray smoke into the dusk. On the windowsill, every morning, the pigeons came. They landed in fluttering rows along the ledge, cooing and tilting their heads at the glass. Tesla knew each one. He kept a small basket of seed by the radiator. The hotel staff had given up trying to stop him. They left a tin of birdseed at the door each week as a kindness. Some of the birds he had been feeding for years. One in particular, a small white pigeon with light gray tips on her wings, was his favorite. He spoke of her the way other men speak of a wife or a daughter. He had told a friend only weeks before that he loved that bird as a man loves a woman. He said she came to him when he was sick. He said when she finally died in his arms, he saw a bright white light come from her eyes, brighter than any electric lamp he had ever built. After that, he said, he knew his own work was finished. The world outside did not know this. The world only knew the name Tesla as a fading echo from another century. The man who had once lit up the Chicago World's Fair, the man who had quarreled with Edison, the man who had promised free electricity for everyone, and then somehow disappeared into hotel rooms and unpaid bills. He had become a ghost while still alive. Reporters had stopped knocking. The patent offices had grown quiet, but Tesla still wrote. He still drew diagrams on hotel stationery in his long, careful hand. He still kept his black trunk locked beneath the bed. He still hung a Do Not Disturb sign on the brass doorknob of Suite 30 327, and he still asked the maids, in his soft Serbian accent, to please leave his papers exactly where they lay. The snow kept falling on Manhattan. The radiator hissed. And inside that small, warm room, the last hours of one of the strangest minds in American history were quietly running out. Her name was Alice Monahan, and she had worked at the New Yorker Hotel for years. She was a small woman with quick hands and a soft voice. The other maids on the 33rd floor knew her by the gentle squeak of her cart wheels rolling down the long carpeted hall. She wore a starched white apron over a gray dress, and her shoes made almost no sound on the wool runner that stretched from one end of the corridor to the other. Alice had a routine, and the routine had a name. Room 3327. She always saved it for the late morning, after the breakfast trays had been cleared and the hallway was quiet. She knew the old man inside slept strange hours. She knew he asked not to be disturbed. She knew the sign on his door, hand-lettered in his own careful script, that read simply, "Do not enter." For 3 days, she had honored that sign. The old man often went quiet for stretches. Sometimes he worked through the night and slept through the day. Sometimes he sat in the dark and spoke to no one. The hotel staff understood. He was a man of habits, and his habits were sacred to him. But on the morning of January 8th, 1943, Alice stopped at his door and felt something different. The hallway was cold. The lamps along the wall threw small pools of yellow light onto green wallpaper. The air smelled faintly of furniture polish and old steam heat. She listened at the door and heard nothing. No shuffling, no pigeons cooing through the open window, no soft voice murmuring numbers in a language she did not understand. She tapped once, then twice. Then she fished out her master key. The room she stepped into was small and tidy. A narrow bed sat against one wall. A wooden desk stood beneath the window, covered in stacks of folded papers and small leather notebooks. There was a single chair, a wash basin, and a metal radiator that ticked like a slow clock. The curtains were pulled halfway. The gray winter light of Manhattan spilled across the rug in pale rectangles. And there, on the bed, lay Nikola Tesla. He was on his back, his hands folded across his chest, his white hair combed flat against the pillow. He looked, Alice would later say, like a man who had simply chosen to lie down and listen to something only he could hear. His face was calm, his eyes were closed. The blanket was pulled up neat and even as if he had tucked himself in for a long rest. She spoke his name. He did not answer. She touched his hand. It was cold as river stone. Alice was not a woman who panicked. She closed the door softly behind her, walked to the service phone at the end of the hall, and called the assistant manager. Her voice did not shake. She told him only that Mr. Tesla had passed and that someone in authority should come quickly. Then she stood in the hallway and waited, her hands folded in front of her apron, the way her mother had taught her to wait in church. The assistant manager was a man named Alphonse, and he climbed the stairs 2 at a time. He was younger than Alice, broad-shouldered, with a neat mustache and a habit of straightening his tie when he was nervous. He straightened it 3 times before he reached the 33rd floor. Behind Alphonse came a bellhop named Frank, who carried a clipboard for reasons nobody could later explain. Frank was 19, freckled, and had once stood in the lobby and watched the old inventor feed crumbs to a pigeon on the windowsill. He had told his mother about it in a letter that very week. Now he stood outside room 3327 and felt the floor tilt a little beneath his polished shoes. They went inside together, the 3 of them. They saw what Alice had seen. Alphonse leaned down close, listened for breath, and stepped back. He crossed himself once, quietly, the way his grandmother had taught him. Frank stood near the door and stared at the desk, at all those notebooks stacked like quiet bricks. None of them touched anything. None of them opened a drawer or lifted a page. They were good workers in a good hotel, and they knew the rules. You called the manager. The manager called the doctor. The doctor called whoever came next. But somewhere, in another building across the city, a telephone had already begun to ring. And the people on the other end of that line had not yet been told a thing. New York City in the winter of 1943 moved at a particular kind of pace. The war was on, and the streets carried that weight in quiet ways. Women in wool coats hurried past newsstands. Soldiers on leave smoked under the awnings of cigar shops. The street lamps glowed yellow through the cold, and the windows of the automat cafeterias steamed up with the breath of tired workers eating early suppers. Manhattan in those days had a rhythm you could almost set a clock by. The milk wagons came before dawn, their horses' hooves clopping soft against the icy cobbles. The newsboys gathered at the corner of 34th Street before the sun was fully up. The bakeries on 8th Avenue pulled rye loaves from brick ovens, and the smell drifted down the block like a warm hand on your shoulder. Inside the lobby of the Hotel New Yorker, the bellmen polished brass and shined the marble floors until they shone like still water. This was the world Nikola Tesla lived in during his final years. A quiet, gentle, humming city full of small kindnesses and small routines. He kept his own schedule, separate from the rest. Every evening, when the lamps came on along Bryant Park, he walked the few blocks from his hotel to the library, where he sat among the old books and the green reading lamps and let his mind wander among numbers and waves. He had his favorite waiters at the Hotel Pennsylvania across the street. He had his pigeons in the park, fed from a paper bag of seed he carried in his coat pocket. He had the elevator man at the New Yorker who knew to take him straight to the 33rd floor without asking. The doormen tipped their hats. The maids left his bedsheets folded just so. He was a tall, thin, elegant figure in a black overcoat, and the staff treated him like a piece of the building itself. To the people who saw him on 7th Avenue, he was just an old gentleman with white gloves and careful manners. They did not know he had once lit up the Great Fair in Chicago with his alternating current. They did not know the lights of Niagara Falls hummed because of his designs. They did not know his name had been spoken in the same breath as Edison's and Marconi's, back when the century was young and electricity itself felt like a kind of magic. To them, he was simply the quiet old man in room 3327. His routines were small and gentle. He drank warm milk in the mornings. He ate alone, often standing, often only after midnight. He wore the same kind of stiff white collar he had worn since the 1890s, when such collars had been the fashion among gentlemen. He never married. He kept no close company. The pigeons of the park were his dearest friends, and the chambermaid said he spoke to them in a soft voice through his open window, even when the snow blew sideways down the avenues. Across the country, the war machine churned. In factories from Detroit to Long Beach, engineers worked on radar, on aircraft, on new kinds of weapons no one had names for yet. The government had its eye on every man who knew anything about wireless transmission, energy beams, or particle physics. Tesla had been writing letters for years to officials in Washington. He spoke of inventions that could end wars before they began. He spoke of beams of energy that could travel across oceans. Some men in uniform read those letters and laughed. Others read them and did not laugh at all. Tesla himself seemed unaware of the watching eyes. His days passed in the same gentle pattern, like the slow turning of a clock he had wound himself long ago. He fed his birds. He paid for his meals with whatever small money he had left. He sent telegrams to his nephew, Sava Kasanovic, who served as a diplomat for the Yugoslav government in exile. He read the evening papers by the light of the lamp beside his bed. The hotel staff later said he looked tired in those last weeks, thinner than usual, a little stooped. He kept to his room more often. He spoke less in the elevator. But he still hung the sign on his door that said, "Do not disturb," and he still expected the same fresh linens, and he still left the window cracked open for the pigeons in the dark. The city went on around him, warm and ordinary, humming with the small sounds of a January night. Nobody yet knew that the federal government had already begun making quiet preparations. Nobody yet knew that the watchers were closer than anyone guessed. The hallway of the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker had a hush about it that morning. The kind of hush that lives inside old buildings when the snow has muffled the streets below. The carpet was a deep red wine color, worn thin down the middle from years of footsteps. Brass sconces glowed yellow along the walls, throwing soft pools of light on the cream-painted plaster. The air smelled faintly of pipe smoke and floor polish, and the cold seeping in through the windows at each end of the corridor. Alice Monahan had already left her cleaning cart by the linen closet. Her hands were still shaking. Word of what she had found in room 3327 was spreading slow and quiet through the staff, the way bad news always does in a hotel. A bellhop had been told. A floor manager had been told. The assistant manager had picked up the phone and dialed the number Tesla had left for emergencies. After that, things should have moved in a certain order. A doctor, a coroner, a family member, a priest, perhaps, if anyone knew which one to call. That is not what happened. Within the hour, 2 men stepped out of the elevator on the 33rd floor. They wore dark wool overcoats, damp at the shoulders from the snow outside. Their hats were pulled low. Their shoes were the kind of polished black leather that does not belong in a hotel hallway on a Tuesday morning. They did not stop at the front desk. They did not ask for directions. They walked straight down the red carpet as if they had been here before, as if the floor plan lived inside their heads. A second elevator opened. 2 more men followed. Then a third pair behind them. None of them spoke. None of them carried luggage. They moved with the quiet certainty of men who knew exactly where they were going and exactly how long they had to get there. The night maid, still standing near the linen closet with her arms wrapped around herself, watched them pass. She would tell the story for the rest of her life. She would say their faces looked carved out of something hard. She would say one of them glanced at her, only for a second, and that glance felt like a door closing. She would say none of them looked surprised. None of them looked sad. They looked like men arriving for a meeting that had been on the calendar for a long time. They stopped outside room 3327. One of them produced a key, not a passkey from the front desk, a key of his own. He fitted it into the lock, and the door swung open without a sound. They stepped inside. The door closed behind them. The hallway returned to its hush. Down at the front desk, the manager was still on the telephone, trying to reach someone at the medical examiner's office. He did not know yet that men were already in the room. Nobody had called him. Nobody had signed the register. Nobody had asked permission. The hotel had a procedure for deaths on the premises, and that procedure had not begun. A bellhop named Charlie would later remember loading a brass cart with extra towels and pushing it toward the service elevator. He passed the door of 3327 and heard a sound from inside that did not match anything he understood. A small metallic click, then another. Then the soft rasp of paper sliding against paper. He slowed his cart. He listened for a moment longer. He heard a man's voice, low and even, reading numbers out loud. Just numbers. A string of them, like a code, like a combination, like a list of pages. Charlie kept walking. He had been told once, when he was first hired, that the best thing a hotel man can do is forget what he hears on the other side of a door. He tried his best to forget. He did not quite manage it. Outside, on 8th Avenue, a black sedan idled at the curb. Snow gathered on its roof and slid off in soft white sheets. The engine ran the whole time. A driver sat behind the wheel with his gloved hands folded. He did not get out. He did not look up at the building. He simply waited, as men in idling cars sometimes do, for something he could not yet see to be carried down to him. Up on the 33rd floor, behind the closed door of room 3327, the old inventor lay where the maid had left him. The window was still open a crack. The snow still drifted in, and the men in the overcoats were already opening drawers. The hotel safe at the New Yorker sat behind the front desk like a black iron tooth. It was squat and heavy, with a brass dial worn smooth by 40 years of fingers. The night clerks knew the safe held jewelry from movie stars and cash from gamblers. They did not know it also held the private papers of the strangest guest the hotel had ever housed. But the bellhops knew. The bellhops always know. In the small kitchens behind the lobby, where the staff drank weak coffee at 3 a.m, the stories began to move. A porter named Eddie told the dishwashers he had seen 2 men in gray suits standing by the safe. They had a paper. They had a key that did not belong to the hotel. They left with a thin leather folder tucked under one arm, and they did not sign the register. The dishwashers told the laundry women. The laundry women told the maids. By the second day after Tesla's death, every floor of the New Yorker hummed with a quiet, careful kind of talk. Out on 8th Avenue, the news drifted further. The newsstand man on the corner heard it from a bellhop who bought cigarettes. The barber 2 blocks down heard it from a regular who worked the hotel switchboard. By the weekend, The story had reached the Serbian coffee houses on the Lower East Side, where old men played chess under tin ceilings stained yellow with smoke. These were Tesla's people, immigrants from the old country, men who remembered when his name was spoken like a saint's. They sat at small round tables, stirring sugar into thick black coffee, and they shook their heads slowly. One old man, a retired machinist named Peter, said he had warned Tesla years ago. He said the inventor had laughed and waved him off. Peter tapped his thick finger on the table and told the others that powerful men had been circling the old genius for decades. Now the body was barely cold, and the wolves were already at the door. Another man at the table, thin as a rake with a white mustache, said something stranger. He said Tesla had once told him about a small black notebook he kept in the hotel safe. The notebook held drawings. The drawings, Tesla had whispered, could light the whole eastern seaboard without a single wire, or they could darken it. The old men crossed themselves. They ordered more coffee. They did not say the word death ray, but it sat above the table like steam. Back uptown, the hotel maids traded their own version. Mrs. Cherney, the head housekeeper, told the younger girls that she had once dusted around an open drawer in Tesla's room. Inside, she had seen blueprints rolled tight as cigars and tied with brown string. She said the paper was heavy, the kind architects use. She said the lines on the drawings glowed faintly under the lamp, though she admitted that might have been her tired eyes. The young girls listened with wide eyes and nodded. None of them doubted her. In a city full of magic men, Tesla had been the most magical of all. At a tavern on 34th Street, the talk turned darker over warm beer. A retired patrolman said he had walked that block for 20 years. He said he had seen black sedans pull up to the New Yorker at strange hours. Men in long coats would step out, go inside, and leave with packages. This had been going on for months, he said, maybe years. Nobody at the tavern argued with him. They just nodded into their glasses. On the church steps after Sunday service, the Serbian women clutched their prayer books and whispered. They said the government had taken everything, every paper, every drawing, every letter from his mother in the old country. They said the safe at the New Yorker had been emptied in a single afternoon, and that the lock was now sealed with red wax stamped by some agency nobody could name. The priest, a quiet man with gentle hands, said only that Mr. Tesla had been a great soul. He said the inventor had loved pigeons more than men, and perhaps that had been wise. None of these people had the full story. The bellhop saw the suits. The maid saw the blueprints. The machinist remembered the warnings. The patrolman remembered the sedans. Each held a single thread, and none of them could see the whole cloth. But threaded together, in the kitchens and coffee houses and church steps of January 1943, a picture began to take shape. Something had been taken, something important, and nobody in the neighborhood believed it would ever come back. His name was Sava Kasanovic. He was a tall man with a careful face and a Yugoslav accent that softened every word. On the night Tesla died, Sava was already in New York. He worked as a diplomat for the new Yugoslav government in exile. He had visited his uncle many times in the small room on the 33rd floor. The two men shared something deeper than blood. They shared a country that no longer existed the way they remembered it. Tesla had been born in a village called Smiljan, in a stony, wind-swept corner of what was once the Austrian Empire. The land there was old, older than any map. The mountains rose like the spines of sleeping animals, gray and silver under a thin sky. Farmers worked the rocky fields with wooden plows. Shepherds moved their flocks along paths their grandfathers had walked. The stories from that place were older still. The Serbs of the Lika region told tales of Vile, the mountain spirits who lived in caves and springs. They spoke of wolves who carried messages between worlds. They believed that a man born during a thunderstorm carried lightning in his hands forever. Tesla had been born during such a storm, on a night when the sky cracked open above Smiljan. The midwife, the family said, had called him a child of darkness. His mother had answered, "No, he will be a child of light." That story followed him across the ocean. It followed him into the laboratories in Colorado Springs. It followed him into the great unfinished tower at Wardenclyffe. And it followed him, finally, into the small hotel room where he died with a pigeon's feather on the windowsill. Sava knew these stories. He had grown up on them. When he heard, on the morning of January 8th, that his uncle had passed in the night, he moved as fast as a man can move through a wartime city. He took a taxi to the New Yorker hotel. The streets were wet with old snow. The sky above Manhattan hung low and gray, the color of pewter, and a thin sleet ticked against the windows of the cab. By the time he stepped into the lobby, he was already too late. The hallway outside room 3327 was busy with men he did not know. Some wore the dark suits of federal agents. Others wore the gray uniforms of hotel staff. A long cart had been wheeled near the elevator. Boxes were being carried out of the room. Papers, notebooks, strange machines wrapped in brown cloth. Sava tried to step inside, and a man with a square jaw put a hand against his chest. "You can't go in there," the man said. "Not now." Sava asked who he was. The man did not answer. He only pointed down the hallway toward the elevator and waited. This was the moment, the family always said, when something very old met something very new. The new was the war machine of the United States government, hungry for any scrap of science that might end the fighting. The old was a nephew standing in a hotel hallway, asking, in the polite voice of a man raised on mountain stories, to see the body of his uncle, to say a prayer, to collect a few small things. He was refused. The land Tesla came from had known invasions for 1,000 years. The Romans had marched through Lika. The Ottomans had ridden over its hills. The Austrians had drawn their borders across its rivers. Each time, the people had learned the same lesson. When men with power come into your house, they do not always come for what you think. Sometimes they come for the small things, the letters, the drawings, the little wooden box on the shelf that nobody else thought was valuable. Sava stood in that hallway, smelling the dust of old carpet and the faint sting of cleaning solution, and he understood. He was watching an invasion, a quiet one, a polite one, but an invasion all the same. He waited for hours. He spoke to managers. He spoke to clerks. He left and came back. By the time he was finally allowed into the room, late that afternoon, the room had been emptied. The safe stood open. The desk was bare. The notebooks Tesla kept by his bed, the ones he wrote in by lamplight when sleep would not come, were gone. The walls held only the faint marks where shelves had been. Sava stood in the empty room. Outside the window, the gray sky pressed against the glass. Somewhere far below, the city moved on unaware. And the nephew who came too late closed his eyes and listened to the silence his uncle had left behind. The truck pulled up to the Hotel New Yorker just after dark on January 8th. Snow still clung to the gutters from the storm 2 nights before, and the streetlights painted the slush in pools of yellow. A young man named Sava Kasanovic stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his coat pockets, watching. He was Tesla's nephew, and he had spent the day arguing with men in dark suits about who owned what his uncle had left behind. Now he watched a flatbed truck back slowly toward the service entrance. The truck was plain, no markings, no company name painted on the side. The driver wore a wool cap pulled low, and 2 men in long coats stood by the loading dock with clipboards. Their breath rose in slow clouds. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Each box that came down the freight elevator had a number chalked on the side, and one of the men checked it against his list before nodding the porter forward. Kasanovic counted the boxes as they came. He lost count somewhere past 40. There were trunks, 2 big black steamer trunks with brass corners worn smooth from travel. There were filing cabinets wrapped in canvas straps. There were tall, narrow crates that looked like they held framed drawings, and small wooden cases the size of cigar boxes that the men carried by hand instead of trusting them to the dolly. Whatever was inside those small cases, it was the most careful work of the night. A reporter from a small science magazine had heard about the death and walked over from a meeting on 8th Avenue. His name has been lost to the records, but his notes lived on through the people he spoke to later. He saw the truck. He saw Kasanovic. He tried to ask one of the men in coats what was being moved, and the man simply turned his back and said nothing. The reporter wrote down the license plate of the truck on the back of a folded envelope. He wrote down the time. He wrote down the way the men checked each box twice before sliding it into the dark mouth of the trailer. The truck pulled away just past 11. It turned south on 8th, then east, then south again toward the warehouses along the Lower West Side. The reporter followed for a few blocks in a borrowed cab. The driver kept a steady distance, never speeding, never running a light. Eventually, the truck slid through a chain link gate into a fenced lot on the edge of the Manhattan Warehouse and Storage Company, a brick building 7 stories tall with iron shutters over every window. The gate closed behind it. A guard stepped out from a small booth and waved the cab away. That building had a quiet reputation. It held things people did not want to lose and did not want to explain. Furniture from estates in probate, crates from embassies, records from companies that had gone under but might come back. It was not unusual for trucks to pull in at strange hours. What was unusual was the paperwork that came with this load. The boxes were logged under Tesla's name, but the bill for the storage was paid by an account the warehouse manager could not identify when asked. The receipt showed only a routing number and a stamp. The reporter went back the next morning. He asked to see the manager. The manager was polite. The manager was firm. The manager said there was nothing on the books matching that description, and would the gentleman please leave through the side door. When the reporter walked out, he noticed a black sedan parked across the street with 2 men inside drinking coffee from paper cups. They watched him go. He went home and wrote up his notes. He kept them in a drawer. He did not publish them because his editor told him the story was too thin and the sources too quiet. But he did not throw them away either. Years later, when researchers began to ask questions about what happened to Tesla's papers, those notes surfaced in a file passed between hands. They are part of the reason we know the truck existed at all. What was inside those boxes, nobody outside that warehouse can say for certain. Kasanovic believed it was everything. Every notebook, every sketch, every coil and tube and half-finished prototype his uncle had carried from hotel to hotel for the last 20 years of his life. The work of a lifetime, rolling south on a quiet street, tracked by a man with a pencil and a folded envelope, vanishing behind an iron gate that would not open again for anyone who asked nicely. The man who came to the Hotel New Yorker that January morning did not look like a thief. He wore a dark wool overcoat dusted with melting snow, and he carried a leather briefcase that creaked when he set it down. His name was Walter Gorsuch, and his title was something most Americans had never heard spoken aloud. He was the alien property custodian. He had come to claim the belongings of a dead man. A bellhop named Albert later told the story to his grandchildren many times. He said he remembered the morning because the lobby smelled of wet wool and cigarette smoke, and the radiators hissed like sleeping cats. He said the suited men spoke in low voices, the way men speak in churches and banks. They asked for the manager. They asked for keys. They did not ask, Albert said, for permission. A maid named Alice Monahan worked the upper floors that week. Years later, she told a reporter what she had seen, though her name never made it into the printed story. She said the men moved through Tesla's rooms with the careful patience of people who already knew what they were looking for. They did not rummage. They did not chatter. One of them held a clipboard, she said, and ticked off items as if reading from a list someone had given him beforehand. She wondered, even then, how such a list could exist. Alice remembered the smell of the rooms most of all. She said it smelled of old paper, machine oil, and the dry feathers of pigeons that had roosted on the windowsill. There were notebooks stacked on the desk, and notebooks stacked on the floor, and notebooks tied with string inside the wardrobe. She said the men touched them like priests handling something holy. They wrapped each one in brown paper before placing it in a wooden crate. The hotel's assistant manager, a man named Stuart Crawford, gave a quiet interview to a small magazine in the 1950s. He described Gorsuch as polite, almost shy, the kind of man who removed his hat indoors and thanked the staff for their trouble. But Crawford said the politeness made it worse, somehow. The papers Gorsuch produced bore federal seals. The signatures on those papers, Crawford said, came from offices so high up in Washington that he had only ever read about them in the newspaper. A young desk clerk whose name has been lost to time once told a college student writing a thesis that she watched a black sedan idle on 8th Avenue for most of that afternoon. She said 2 men sat inside, smoking, never speaking, watching the side entrance where the freight elevator opened. She said she watched them for nearly an hour, and they never moved, not even to wipe the fogged windows. She said she had seen plenty of strange things working a Manhattan hotel. This one stayed with her. Down in the basement, a maintenance worker named Joe Pavlik helped wheel the crates out to the loading dock. He told his union brothers, over beers at a tavern on 34th Street, that the boxes were heavier than they should have been. He said one of them rattled with what sounded like glass tubes. Another felt strangely light, as if it held only paper. A third, he said, had been wrapped in canvas and tied with steel wire, and the agents would not let anyone but themselves touch it. Joe remembered something else. He said one of the men carried a small black device that looked like a radio, and he ran it slowly over each crate before sealing it. Joe didn't know what the device was for. He said the agent watched the dial the way a doctor watches a pulse. The official record of that day is thin as onion paper. A single memo confirms that Gorsuch entered room 3327 and took possession of Tesla's belongings on behalf of the United States government. The memo lists no inventory. It names no witnesses. It mentions only that the contents were transferred to the Manhattan Storage and Warehouse Company on East 52nd Street, and that the matter was, in the dry language of bureaucracy, handled. The people who watched it knew they were watching something rare. They could not have named it. They could not have explained it. They only knew, the way you know a thunderstorm is coming before the first drop falls, that the quiet old man on the 33rd floor had left behind something the country wanted very badly. And they knew, as they went back to their mops and clipboards and front desks, that they would never be told what it was. The warehouse sat on the west side of Manhattan, a brick building with high windows clouded by decades of dust. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and machine oil. Men in dark coats moved between rows of crates, their footsteps echoing off concrete floors. They carried clipboards. They marked numbers in careful handwriting. And the boxes kept coming, truck after truck, until they rose in towers that touched the ceiling beams. There were said to be more than 80 trunks in all. Some were wooden, banded with iron straps. Some were metal, painted a dull army green. A few were leather, soft with age, the kind a traveler might have carried across the ocean 50 years before. Each one bore a tag tied with rough twine. Each tag carried a single name written in pencil: Tesla. The men who stacked them did not know what they held. They had been told only to be careful. They had been told to count. They had been told not to talk. And so they worked in a quiet that felt heavier than the boxes themselves, like the room was holding its breath along with them. What is strange, what begins to rhyme as you listen to the old accounts, is how often the same details surface in stories told by people who never met. A clerk who worked the loading dock spoke of seeing a long copper coil wrapped in burlap, taller than a man, lifted by 4 workers with rope harnesses. A janitor who swept the warehouse floors remembered glass tubes that glowed faintly even after the lights were turned off, sitting on a shelf for one night before vanishing by morning. A typist hired to record inventory said she watched a soldier carry a wooden case the size of a hat box, and that the case hummed softly in his hands. None of these people knew each other. None of them were trying to build a legend. They simply remembered what they had seen years later, when reporters and biographers came knocking with notebooks of their own. The details lined up like beads on a string. The dates lined up too. The maid found Tesla cold in his bed on the morning of January 8th. By that same afternoon, federal agents were inside room 3327. By the following morning, the safe in the hotel basement had been opened and emptied. By the 3rd day, the trucks were rolling toward the Manhattan warehouse. 3 days. That was all it took to move a lifetime of work from a small hotel room into a guarded brick building across the city. And the locations overlapped in ways that felt almost planned. The Hotel New Yorker sat on 8th Avenue. The warehouse sat less than 2 miles north and west, close enough that a man could walk it in under an hour. The office of the Custodian of Alien Property, where decisions about the seizure were being made, sat closer still. 3 points on a map, drawn tight as a triangle, with Tesla's papers passing between them like a secret handed from one room to the next. The custodian's office had a name on its door that day: Irving Giuro, a clerk and a lawyer working under the broader authority of an office that traced its roots back to the First World War. The office existed to take property from foreign nationals during wartime. Tesla, though, was an American citizen. He had been naturalized in 1891. He had carried that citizenship for more than 50 years. And yet the custodian's office took his papers anyway, marking them under a category that should not have applied to him at all. That is one of the patterns that keeps surfacing when you sit with this story long enough. The rules bent. the paperwork stretched. The reasons given did not quite match the actions taken. A citizen's belongings were treated as enemy property. A scientist's notebooks were guarded like munitions. A pile of papers in a hotel safe was hauled away under armed escort. The men in the warehouse, stacking those boxes to the ceiling, were following orders that traveled down a chain none of them could see the top of. Somewhere above them, someone had decided that Tesla's work was too important to leave in the hands of his family. Someone had decided that the inventor's nephew, who was already on a train heading toward New York, would arrive to find empty rooms and locked doors. The boxes rose higher. The dust settled on their lids. And outside, in a city that knew nothing yet of what had been taken, the snow began to fall on 8th Avenue in soft, patient flakes that covered everything they touched. His name was John George Trump, not a famous name in 1943, not a name most people would have known. He was a young engineer, somewhere in his middle 30s, with a soft face and round glasses that gave him the look of a kind schoolteacher. He taught electrical work at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He wore tidy suits and combed his hair flat against his head. He spoke in a quiet voice that carried the weight of careful thinking. The government called on him for one reason. He understood machines the way a poet understands words. He could read a circuit drawing the way another man might read a letter from home. The military trusted him with secrets, and that trust ran deep. When the agents in the Manhattan warehouse needed someone to open Tesla's boxes, they did not call a soldier. They called John Trump. He came down from Boston by train. The story says he arrived on a cold January afternoon, only days after Tesla had been found in room 3327. The sky over Manhattan was the color of wet ash. The streets glittered with old salt and tired snow. Trump walked into the warehouse with a small notebook tucked under his arm and a pencil sharpened to a fine point. He nodded to the men who stood at attention by the doors. Then he looked at the boxes. There were so many of them, wooden crates and metal trunks, cardboard files tied shut with brown string, steamer luggage covered in faded labels from hotels long shut down. The boxes stretched in long crooked rows under the bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled like dust and old paper, and the faint, sweet smell of pipe tobacco that had soaked into Tesla's belongings over 40 years. Trump took off his coat. He hung it on a nail. He rolled up his sleeves the way a baker rolls up his sleeves before kneading the morning bread. Then he sat down on a wooden crate and began. The work took 3 days, 3 full days of reading, 3 full days of unfolding papers, lifting lids, and turning yellowed pages by the light of one swinging bulb. 2 other men sat with him, both Navy officers in clean uniforms. They watched, they listened, they passed him papers. But Trump did the reading. He read with the patience of a man digging a well by hand, page after page, folder after folder. Sketches drawn in pencil, letters written in Tesla's careful curling script, diagrams covered in numbers and small notes in the margins. Some of the notes were in English. Some were in Serbian. Some were in a private code that only Tesla seemed to understand. Trump did not rush. He copied things down in his little notebook. He set certain folders aside in their own neat stack. The hotel had sent over more material, too. Boxes from the Hotel New Yorker. Boxes from the Hotel Governor Clinton. Boxes from the Hotel Pennsylvania, where Tesla had once kept a room. Each hotel had stored his things over the years, sometimes as payment, sometimes as kindness. Now all those boxes sat together in one warehouse for the first time. A man's whole working life pressed into wood and cardboard. Trump found models too. Strange shapes wrapped in cloth. Coils of copper wire wound tight as bird nests. Glass tubes shaped like long, thin fingers. A metal frame about the size of a hat box with small dials and a faded label. He turned each object over in his hands. He sketched it. He measured it. He set it down gently, the way a man sets down a sleeping cat. On the third day, he wrote his report. It was a quiet report. Plain words, careful sentences. He said that Tesla's recent work was mostly theory. He said the famous death ray was, in his opinion, not a working weapon. He said the boxes held no machine ready to change the war. He signed his name and gave the report to the Navy. Then he put on his coat and went back to Boston. That should have been the end. A young officer named Trump came, he looked, he wrote a paper, he left. The boxes could have gone home to the family, but the boxes did not go home. The seals stayed on. The guards stayed at the doors. The warehouse stayed locked. And the men in suits kept coming and going as if Trump had never written a word. Something in those boxes, the story says, did not match the calm report. Something stayed behind that John Trump either did not see or saw and chose not to write down. John Trump sat at a long table in the Manhattan warehouse. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco and the faint metal tang of typewriter ribbons. A single lamp hung low over the wood. Around him stood crates pried open, their lids leaning against the legs like tired dogs. Inside the crates lay notebooks, hundreds of them, bound in black cloth, in brown leather, in cheap cardboard worn soft at the corners. Each one carried Tesla's handwriting, that long looping script that ran across the pages like wind across tall grass. Trump was a serious man. He taught electrical engineering at MIT. He had built machines that could see inside the human body and machines that could strip rust from steel. He did not believe in ghost stories. He did not believe in magic. He believed in math and in the steady, honest hum of a working circuit. The Navy had sent him here because they trusted his eyes. If anything in those crates could win the war, John Trump would know it. He spent 3 days reading. He read by lamplight and by the gray light of January mornings. He read while the radiators clanked and the snow piled on the warehouse windows. He read about resonant frequencies and standing waves. He read about coils wound in patterns no factory had ever built. He read sketches of towers that pulled power from the sky and pages of equations that ran for paragraphs without a single break. And somewhere in those notebooks, he found the drawings of the particle beam. Tesla called it teleforce. The papers called it a death ray, but Tesla hated that name. He said it was a peace ray, a beam of charged particles fired through an open vacuum tube traveling in a straight line for 200 miles. It could melt an airplane engine at altitude. It could stop an army before it crossed a border. The math was there. The diagrams were there. The voltages, the chamber dimensions, the cooling systems, all written in that long, looping hand. Trump read it twice, then a third time. Then he closed the notebook and set it down on the table and sat with his hands folded. What he wrote in his report later became the strange detail nobody can quite settle. Trump said the notebooks contained no working device, no secret weapon, nothing the United States could build and fly against the Germans by spring. He said the papers were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character. He said they posed no danger in the hands of an enemy. He recommended the seal be removed and the boxes returned to whoever the courts decided owned them. That was the official word. But here is the thing that does not quite fit. Here is the splinter in the wood. If the notebooks were only daydreams, only the late ramblings of an old man feeding pigeons in a hotel room, why did the government keep them? Why did the FBI mark the file secret and keep it secret for decades? Why did agents track every cousin and every old letter and every typewriter ribbon for years after the body was buried? Why did the custodian of enemy property hold those crates until 1952, almost a decade after Trump said there was nothing in them? A man does not lock an empty room. Some who studied the report later noticed something else. Trump examined the papers in the warehouse, yes, but there was a smaller case kept apart from the rest, a safe within the safe. A package Tesla himself had labeled with a warning, saying it should not be opened without his permission. Trump wrote that he did examine this package. He wrote that it contained a wooden box with brass fittings. And he wrote, almost in passing, that he did not open it fully. He said Tesla's note suggested the contents were sensitive. He said he chose to leave the inner contents alone. The inner box was never described again in any document the public has seen. Whatever sat inside that wooden case, with its brass corners and its handwritten warning, passed through Trump's hands and back into a crate and into a truck and into a vault, and from there into the long, quiet years that followed. Some say the box held the working model of the beam. Some say it held nothing but a joke, a final wink from a man who liked to be feared. Some say it held papers that even Trump, with all his math and all his confidence, did not feel right to read. The notebooks went back into their crates. The lamp clicked off. The warehouse door closed. And the snow kept falling on the Manhattan rooftops, white and patient, hiding everything beneath it. Now, not everyone believes the story you've been hearing, and it would be unfair to keep going without sitting for a moment with the doubters, because they have good reasons too. The skeptics start with a simple point. Tesla, in his final years, was a tired old man who lived on warm milk and crackers in a hotel room. He fed pigeons in the park. He talked about machines that could split the earth like an apple. He claimed he had spoken with beings from Mars. To some, that does not sound like a working scientist. That sounds like a mind softened by age and loneliness. They point to his press conferences in the late 30s. Every year on his birthday, Tesla would invite reporters to his hotel suite. He would sit in a stiff chair, dressed in a clean, dark suit, his white hair combed back like silk. And every year, he would announce a new wonder. A beam that could melt airplanes from 200 miles away. A wireless system to power the whole world. A motor that ran on cosmic rays falling from the stars. But the machines never came. No demonstration. No working model. No photograph of the death ray in action. Just words, spoken in that soft accent, in a hotel room that smelled of pigeon feathers and old paper. The skeptics say this is the whole story. An old genius, once brilliant, now spinning dreams to keep the reporters coming. They have more arguments. They say the FBI took his papers as a matter of routine. Tesla was born in what was then the Austrian Empire. By 1943, parts of his homeland sat under enemy control. Any foreign-born inventor's papers might be seized in wartime. It was not a conspiracy. It was paperwork, a clerk doing a job. And the young naval officer named John Trump, the one who came to look through the boxes, he wrote a report. The skeptics love this report. They quote it gently, like a final word. Trump concluded that Tesla's papers held no new scientific ideas, nothing of military value, nothing dangerous, just speculation and theory, just the dreams of an old man. So the skeptics close the book. They say the mystery is no mystery at all. A famous inventor died poor and strange. The government glanced at his papers, found nothing useful, and moved on. The rest, they say, is legend grown thick on the bones of a quiet death. These are good arguments. They deserve a fair hearing, and many serious historians stand behind them. But here is where even the doubters slow down. Here is where the room gets quiet. Because if Tesla's papers held nothing of value, why were they sealed for decades after his death? Why did the FBI keep a file on the contents that stayed classified into the 1980s? Why did agents return again and again in the years after, checking and rechecking the inventory? If the death ray was just an old man's daydream, why did the United States military, in the years right after the war, quietly fund research into directed energy weapons? Why did Soviet scientists, working in secret labs near the Black Sea, write papers that referenced Tesla by name? And the John Trump report itself. The skeptics hold it up like a closing door. But Trump's report ran only a few pages. He looked at a mountain of notebooks, drawings, and equipment over the course of 3 days. 3 days to study the lifetime work of one of the strangest minds in American history. Some of the boxes, according to other accounts, were never opened at all. There is also the small matter of the missing items. Tesla kept careful lists. He wrote down what he owned, what he was working on, what sat in which trunk. When the inventory was compared to his own notes years later, things did not match. Drawings he had described in letters to friends were simply gone. A black trunk he had mentioned by name to his nephew never appeared on any official list. The skeptics cannot explain the missing trunk. They cannot explain the sealed files. They cannot explain why the government, having declared the papers worthless, refused for 40 years to let anyone else look. Maybe Tesla was a dreamer at the end. Maybe the death ray was only ink on paper, a fading idea in a tired mind. The doubters may be right about most of it. They may be right about all of it. But there is a shape in the silence around his death, a weight to the locked doors and the long delays. And even the most careful skeptic, when pressed on the missing pages, will look down at the floor for a moment before answering. That pause is the heart of the thing. That pause is what keeps the story alive. To understand why some people still believe Tesla built things the world was not ready to see, you have to go back to a quiet stretch of Long Island shoreline. The year was 1901. The place was a flat patch of farmland near a village called Shoreham. The sky there was wide and pale, the grass tall and bent by salt wind off the sound. Tesla stood on that land with rolled blueprints under his arm and a look in his eye like a man who had already seen the finished thing in a dream. He called the place Wardenclyffe. The name had a soft music to it, like something out of an old storybook. He bought 200 acres and broke ground that same summer. Workers came in wagons and on foot, hauling brick and steel and copper coil. A red brick laboratory rose first, low and long, with tall arched windows that caught the morning light. The roof was flat, the chimneys were square. From a distance, it looked like a country schoolhouse built for giants. Then came the tower. 187 feet of timber and iron, rising from the field like the mast of some impossible ship. A great copper dome crowned the top, shaped like a mushroom cap and polished until it shone. Beneath the ground, Tesla sank an iron shaft 300 feet deep. He said the Earth itself needed to be gripped. He said the planet was a living battery. He said he could pull electricity from the soil and send it through the air to every corner of the world. The people who worked on that tower never forgot it. They spoke of it for the rest of their lives, even when nobody asked. One foreman, an old Irishman with white whiskers, told a reporter 40 years later that the air around the tower would hum on certain nights. A low sound, he said, like a bee inside a glass jar. He said the hairs on his arms would stand up when he walked too close. He said he was not afraid of the place, only sorry it had been left to rot. A young night watchman named Adamson swore he had seen the dome glow once, a soft blue light spreading out from the copper like mist on a pond. He told his grandchildren about it. He told them again on his deathbed. He never changed his story. He never asked anyone to believe him. He only said, calm and certain, that he had seen what he had seen. The believers were not loud people. They were farmers and machinists, deliverymen and stenographers. They were the ones who had stood close enough to feel the static lift their clothing. They were the ones who had watched Tesla pace the laboratory floor at 2 in the morning, muttering numbers in 3 different languages. They knew what they had witnessed, and they did not need a newspaper to make it true. The money ran out in 1905. J.P. Morgan, who had bankrolled the project, learned that Tesla meant to give the power away for free. No meters, no bills, no fortunes to be made. Morgan closed his checkbook with the soft snap of a man closing a coffin lid. The work stopped. The crews drifted away. Tesla stayed on, alone in the brick laboratory, walking circles around the silent tower. He stayed for 11 more years, even as the weeds climbed the foundation and the windows grew dusty. He kept paying what he could. He kept the lights on as long as the bank would let him. He wrote letters begging for one more chance. None came. In the summer of 1917, during the First World War, the government ordered the tower destroyed. They said it might be a beacon for German submarines. They sent men with dynamite. The great wooden frame came down in a slow groan, the copper dome crashing into the grass like a fallen moon. The believers who saw it fall said the ground itself seemed to flinch. Tesla was not there to watch. He read about it in the paper in a hotel room far away, and he set the paper down without a word. Yet the believers held on. They passed the story to their children. They drove out to Shoreham on Sunday afternoons just to stand in the empty field. Some of them carried small jars of soil home in their pockets, as if the dirt itself still held a charge. They were not crazy. They were not chasing ghosts. They simply knew that something rare had stood in that field, and that the men who tore it down had been afraid of what they could not measure. To understand why those notebooks mattered so much, you have to walk back to a quieter place. You have to stand in the dust of an old field in West Orange, New Jersey, where the brick walls of Thomas Edison's laboratory still lean against the wind. The trees there grew up strange around the property. The old maples bent away from the buildings, as if leaning toward better company. Locals will tell you the squirrels never nest in those branches, and the crows skip the rooftops when they fly the long line from Newark to the river. The land remembers what people forget. And the land between Edison's lab and the ghost of Tesla's tower out on Long Island holds a long, cold silence. The feud began in the winter of 1884. Tesla stepped off a steamship in New York Harbor with 4 cents in his pocket, a book of his own poems, and a letter of introduction. The letter spoke of him like a small miracle. Edison hired him, sat him down at a workbench, and waited to see what the young Serbian could do. What Tesla did was rebuild Edison's clunky, direct current motors from the inside out. He worked through the nights. He slept maybe 2 hours at a stretch. The lamps in the upper windows of the Edison shop burned so late that neighbors swore the building never slept. Tesla finished the job in months, and Edison, by every account Tesla ever gave, refused to pay the promised bonus of $50,000. He laughed and called it an American joke. Tesla walked out. He never walked back. The ground where he then dug ditches to feed himself, a few blocks from the lab where he had remade Edison's motors, is still there under the pavement of Lower Manhattan. Workmen who have broken that ground for new buildings tell stories of finding strange copper wire bent in coils, buried deep, with no record of who put it there. Maybe a worker dropped it. Maybe a young inventor with frostbitten hands once tried to keep himself warm with the only thing he understood. The war that came next was a war of currents. Edison wanted the world wired with direct current, his patents, his system. Tesla, soon backed by George Westinghouse, offered alternating current. It was cleaner, cheaper, and could travel hundreds of miles instead of a few city blocks. Edison fought back the way a cornered animal fights. He staged grim public shows, killing stray dogs and an old circus elephant named Topsy with alternating current, trying to scare the public into believing Tesla's invention was death itself. The fields where those shows happened in Coney Island and West Orange went quiet afterward. Old photographs show grass that grew patchy for years. Whether that is true memory or trick of the eye, no one can say. But the locals point to the spots even now. Tesla won the current war. His system lit the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893 with a soft white glow that made grown men weep. His turbines turned at Niagara Falls and sent power humming across the dark countryside. Edison kept his name on the light bulb, but the wires running into every American home carried Tesla's signal. You would think a victory like that would heal a wound. It did not. Edison lived in a fine house on a green hill in Llewellyn Park. Tesla lived in hotel rooms, moving from one to the next as the bills piled up. Edison collected honors. Tesla collected pigeons. When the Nobel Prize Committee, in 1915, floated the idea of giving the physics prize to both men together, the story goes that each refused to share it with the other. Neither one ever received it. The prize went elsewhere that year, and the silence between the two men grew so heavy it sat on the city like fog off the Hudson. Edison died in 1931. Tesla was asked for a comment. He gave one, gentle and measured, saying Edison had no hobby, cared for no amusement, and lived in disregard of the most elementary rules of hygiene. It was not cruelty. It was the truth as Tesla saw it, told plain. Out on the meadow at Shoreham, Long Island, where Wardenclyffe Tower once stood, the ground still holds an odd quiet. Birds pass over it without stopping. The grass grows in uneven patches above the buried tunnels Tesla dug beneath his tower. Whatever copper and iron once sang there has long since been carted away. But the land remembers the hum. And the feud that began over $50,000 in a Manhattan workshop ended, In a way, only when the men who knew its real shape were both gone. There's a bundle of letters that lived in a leather folder Tesla carried with him from hotel to hotel. The paper was thin and yellowed at the edges, soft as old linen, folded so many times the creases had begun to split. The handwriting on them belonged to a man named George Westinghouse. And to understand why those letters mattered, you have to understand that Tesla was not the only American genius whose private papers vanished into government hands. This kind of thing has happened before. It has happened since. Different names, different decades, but the same quiet pattern repeats like a song you've heard your whole life without knowing the words. Westinghouse wrote to Tesla for years. The letters started warm, full of business talk and gentle questions about the Serbian inventor's health. They spoke of motors and turbines and the great dream of sending power across long copper wires. Westinghouse called Tesla his friend. He signed the letters with a careful hand, the ink pressed deep into the page as if he wanted every word to last. Then the tone changed. The later letters carried a softer worry. Westinghouse asked Tesla to be careful. He warned him about the men who circled his work. He spoke of patents that had a way of disappearing from desks, of notebooks that walked out of laboratories in the dark of night. The world of invention, he wrote, was a forest full of wolves. Tesla kept those letters until the day he died. They sat in his hotel safe beside the drawings of his great tower and the formulas he never showed anyone. When the men in suits cleared out room 3327, the letters went into the boxes with everything else. Nobody has seen them since. This was not a new story even then. Go back to the 1860s, and you'll find a Vermont man named John Worrell Keely, who claimed he had built an engine that ran on the hidden music of atoms. When Keely died, federal men and private investors descended on his workshop in Philadelphia. They tore up the floorboards. They pulled apart his strange brass spheres. His notebooks scattered into a dozen private collections and were never gathered together again. Whatever Keely knew, or pretended to know, went into the ground with him. Go forward a few decades, and you find Thomas Townsend Brown, a quiet Ohio man who tinkered with electricity and gravity in a basement workshop. He filed patents on what he called electrogravitics. He wrote letters to the Navy. The Navy wrote back, polite and curious. Then his papers went classified. Brown lived out his days in modest little houses by the sea, never quite free to speak of what he'd built. And when he died, his last research files passed into hands the family never named. Then there is Wilhelm Reich, the strange doctor from Maine who built wooden boxes he believed could heal the sick. The federal government burned his books in an incinerator in New York in 1956. They burned them by the ton. 6 tons of paper, journals, letters, and research notes reduced to gray ash on a summer afternoon. His followers stood and watched the smoke rise. Nobody who saw it ever forgot. The same shape, over and over. A lone inventor. A workshop full of strange machines. A government that arrives quietly, often after death, sometimes before. Boxes carried out by men whose names nobody learns. A family told to wait, told to be patient, told that everything will be returned in time. Almost nothing is ever returned in time. The letters from Westinghouse were part of this old American song. They were proof that Tesla had been warned. They were proof that even his closest friend, a man who had made millions in the electric trade, understood that the work of certain inventors did not belong to the inventors at all. It belonged to whoever could reach it first. Some folklorists who study these patterns say the missing papers form a kind of hidden library scattered across the country. A library of inventions that never reached the world. A library of half-finished dreams sleeping in steel cabinets in warehouses in Maryland and Virginia, in basements under federal buildings in Washington, in private collections behind oak doors in towns nobody visits. If such a library exists, Tesla's letters from Westinghouse rest somewhere on its shelves. The thin paper, the careful ink, the warnings of a friend who saw the wolves before Tesla did. And the same wind that carried away Keely's notebooks, and Brown's diagrams, and Reich's burning pages, blew through room 3327 on a January morning in 1943, and carried Tesla's letters off with all the rest. The paper trail Tesla left behind is thin in some places and thick in others, like snow that drifted unevenly across a long winter. The thickest drifts are the hotel bills. They survive in folders, in archive boxes, in the careful hands of librarians who handle them with cotton gloves. You can hold copies of them today. They tell a story all their own. The New Yorker Hotel kept records the way all grand hotels did in those years. Every meal sent up to a room, every laundry pickup, every long-distance call. Every week the bill grew a little longer, and every week near the end of Tesla's life, the bill went unpaid. The numbers climbed like ivy on a stone wall. By the time Tesla died, the back rent on room 3327 had grown to something close to $2,000. In 1943, that was a small fortune. A working man might earn that in a year. The hotel let it slide. The manager kept sending polite notes upstairs, and Tesla kept signing for more milk and more pigeon seed and more telegrams to places far away. The bills themselves are strange objects to look at. The paper is thin and yellow now. The typewriter ink has faded to a soft gray, like pencil left out in the sun. Each line item reads like a small clue. Sardines, warm milk, a pot of tea, bird food, charged again and again, week after week. The man who once promised to light the world without wires was, at the end, ordering crackers and feeding sparrows from a window ledge. The Westinghouse Company paid for that room. That detail sits inside the bills like a stone inside a peach. George Westinghouse had been dead for nearly 30 years by then, but the company he built still sent a quiet check every month to cover Tesla's lodging. They called it a consulting fee, Everyone knew it was charity. Tesla, proud as a winter hawk, accepted it because there was nothing else left to accept. You can find letters in the Westinghouse archive that mention this arrangement. Short notes between executives. One man writes to another asking how long the company should keep paying. Another writes back saying, as long as the old inventor draws breath. The letters are polite and businesslike. They mention Tesla the way you might mention a distant uncle who needs looking after. There is a photograph from those years that shows the room. Not Tesla, just the room. Someone took it after he died, maybe for insurance, maybe for the hotel. The bed is narrow and neatly made. The dresser holds a small stack of papers and a glass. The curtains are heavy and dark. On the windowsill, you can see scratches in the wood and small dark stains. Bird droppings, dried hard over years of feeding. The pigeons left their mark on the very wood of the building. In the background of that photograph, on a small table near the window, sits a stack of envelopes. Unopened mail. Bills the hotel had pushed under the door and Tesla had let pile up. You can almost count them in the picture. 12, maybe 15 envelopes sitting like fallen leaves on the polished wood. The hotel safe held other artifacts too. When the federal men came and opened it, they made a list. That list survives. It mentions a sealed envelope marked with Tesla's handwriting and the words government only. It mentions a black notebook bound in leather, edges worn soft. It mentions stock certificates from companies long since dissolved. It mentions a ribbon and a medal in a velvet case, gifts from foreign governments who remembered him better than his own country did. None of the items on that list were valuable in the usual sense. A jeweler would have laughed at them, but somebody in Washington wanted them badly enough to send a custodian, an officer, and a truck. That contrast is one of the artifacts, too, in a way. The gap between what the objects looked like and what someone believed they could do. There is one more piece of paper worth holding. A small slip from the hotel's front desk, dated 2 days after Tesla died. It is a receipt. It says the bill was settled in full. No name is given for who paid it. No check number, no signature, just a stamp and the words, account closed. The man who could not afford his own room while he lived suddenly had his debts wiped clean the moment he stopped breathing. Somebody, somewhere, wanted that ledger closed quickly. Somebody wanted no loose threads hanging from the New Yorker hotel on the morning the trucks pulled away. There is a story the Tesla family told for years, not loudly, not in newspapers or on television, just at kitchen tables late at night when the dishes had been cleared and the coffee had gone cold. The story of a brown envelope. Sava Kasanovic, the nephew, had a sister. Her name was rarely spoken in public records. She lived a long, quiet life, far from the noise of New York and Washington. But she remembered things. She remembered the days after her uncle died. She remembered the phone calls in strange languages. And she remembered the brown envelope that arrived one autumn afternoon, years later, with no return address. The envelope, the family said, was thick. The paper was rough and the color of weak tea. It had been tied with brown string, the kind butchers used to wrap meat. Inside were pages, handwritten pages, some in English, some in Serbian. Some in a tight, slanted script that nobody in the family could read at all. Nobody knew who sent it. The postmark, according to the story, was smudged beyond reading. The stamps were American. But the handwriting on the outside did not match anything the family had on file. It simply appeared the way mushrooms appear after rain. The pages inside were photocopies. Some were photographs of photographs. A few looked like they had been copied many times, each generation a little fainter than the last. There were sketches of coils, diagrams of round towers, notes about frequencies and resonance, and something the writer called the standing wave. There were also pages that seemed personal. A letter to a woman, a note about a pigeon, a list of debts and the names of hotels. The family looked at the envelope. They turned it over in their hands. They asked each other what to do. In the end, they did nothing. They put it in a drawer. They put the drawer in a closet. They closed the closet and lived their lives. That is how the story goes. Generations passed. Children grew up hearing about the envelope the way other children hear about a great-grandfather's medal or a grandmother's wedding ring. Some believed it, some did not. A cousin in Chicago claimed she had seen it once, as a girl, spread out on a dining room table while the grown-ups whispered in another room. She remembered the smell of old paper and pipe tobacco. She remembered her aunt crying softly into a handkerchief. Another cousin, this one in Cleveland, said the envelope had been opened only once and then sealed again with wax. He said his uncle had warned him never to ask about it. He said the warning was given the way you warn a child about a hot stove. A third cousin said the whole thing was a fairy tale. Just a family legend that grew bigger with each retelling, like a fish that gets longer every time the story is told. Yet the details kept matching. Brown paper, brown string, pages in 3 languages, sketches of towers, a letter to a woman, a note about a pigeon. 3 branches of the family, scattered across 3 states, telling almost the same story without having spoken to each other in decades. Some researchers have tried to find the envelope. They have written letters. They have made polite phone calls. They have driven to small houses in small towns and sat on porches drinking lemonade with elderly relatives. Always the answer is the same. The envelope was real. The envelope is gone. Maybe it was thrown out during a move. Maybe it was burned in a basement fire in the 1970s. Maybe it sits, even now, in a cardboard box in somebody's attic, forgotten under a stack of old tax returns. The family does not know. The family will probably never know. What the story tells us, though, is something quieter than the envelope itself. It tells us that somebody, somewhere, kept copies. Somebody made photographs of photographs. Somebody handwrote pages and tied them with string and sent them across the country to a family that had no power to use them. Somebody wanted Tesla's work to survive. even in pieces, even in whispers, even in a brown envelope with a smudged postmark. Whether that somebody was a friend, a worker from the warehouse, a curious clerk, or simply a stranger who had once shaken Tesla's hand, no one can say. The envelope is part of the family now, passed down like a recipe nobody quite remembers. A small, soft mystery, sitting in the back of a drawer, in the back of a closet, in the back of a house, in the back of a long American story that nobody has finished telling. Step away from the bright lights for a moment. Step away from the patent claims and the death ray drawings and the men in dark suits with their clipboards and their orders. Set all that down on the table beside you and just listen. Underneath every loud part of this story, there is a softer one. And the softer one is about a trunk. People who knew Tesla in those last years talk about it. Not in interviews or sworn statements, but in passing, the way folks mention something they half remember from a long time ago. A black steamer trunk, old leather straps, brass buckles worn smooth by years of travel. He had carried it from hotel to hotel for decades, the way a man might carry a child he loved too much to leave behind. Some said it was kept under his bed in room 3327. Others said the hotel staff moved it from one closet to another whenever they cleaned. A bellhop named Murphy is said to have lifted it once, and he said it felt strange. Heavier on one side, like the weight inside had settled and gone hard. Nobody in the official records mentions a black trunk. The inventory lists drawn up by the custodian of enemy property speak of crates and barrels and bundles tied with string. They list typewriters and notebooks and machine parts wrapped in oilcloth. But the trunk, if it ever existed, does not appear on any page that survives. And yet the story refuses to die. There were people in that hotel, working folks who pushed brooms down those long carpeted hallways, who swore for years afterward that they saw it carried out. Not with the rest of the boxes, not in the daylight. They said 2 men took it down a service elevator in the small hours of the morning before the sun touched the windows on 5th Avenue. They said it went into a separate car. A black sedan with no markings parked at the curb where the laundry trucks usually idled. You can believe that or not. The men who would know are long gone. The hotel itself has changed hands a dozen times. The service elevator has been replaced with something modern and quiet and humming. But here is the quiet truth underneath all of it. Whether the trunk was real, whether it held the last great secret of Nikola Tesla, or just a stack of old shirts and a photograph of his mother, something happened in that building that mattered to the people who were there. They felt it. They remembered it for the rest of their lives. The night porter who worked the lobby in those years used to tell his grandchildren about it. He would sit in a kitchen in Queens with a cup of black coffee going cold in his hand, and he would describe the way the lobby felt that morning. Empty in a way lobbies are not supposed to be empty. The air still and watchful. The brass lamps burning low. A man in a gray overcoat standing by the front desk with a folded paper in his hand, waiting for something he would not name. A waitress from the hotel restaurant told a similar story to her sister. She said she came in early to prep the breakfast service and found two strangers sitting at a corner table, not eating, not drinking, just watching the elevators. They were still there when she left at the end of her shift. These are small memories, the kind that do not make it into history books or government reports, the kind that get told over kitchen tables and front porches and never anywhere louder. But they add up. They become a kind of weather around the bigger story, a fog that settles in and refuses to lift. The community around that hotel, the maids and porters and cooks and night clerks, they all carried a piece of this for the rest of their lives. They knew something had happened on their watch. They knew a great man had died upstairs, and that men they did not recognize had come and gone with packages they were not allowed to ask about. Whatever was in the black trunk, if there ever was a black trunk, it walked out of that hotel and into the long quiet of American memory. It joined the other lost things, the papers that went missing on trains, the letters burned in stoves by careful widows, the notebooks tucked into attic rafters and forgot when the houses were sold. A whole country is built on small disappearances like that. Little vanishings that nobody can quite prove and nobody can quite forget. And the story of Nikola Tesla, in its softest and truest form, is just one more of them. Picture yourself standing on a quiet street in Lower Manhattan, late on a winter night in the middle of the 20th century. The city hums around you, but softly, like a great animal breathing in its sleep. A thin layer of snow lies on the sidewalk, blue under the street lamps. The air smells of cold iron and coal smoke. Your breath rises in little white clouds, drifting up past the tall windows of an old brick warehouse on the corner. This is the place where the trunks were taken. The boxes, the notebooks, the strange devices wrapped in oilcloth. Somewhere inside this building, behind brick walls and locked steel doors, the life's work of Nikola Tesla sat in the dark. And in another building, miles away, a thick file with his name on the cover sat in a green metal cabinet. The file would stay closed for 60 years. Stand here a moment and listen. A delivery truck rolls past, its tires hissing on the wet street. Somewhere a church bell marks the hour. A cat slips between two parked cars and vanishes into an alley. The sky above the rooftops is the color of old velvet, deep and soft, and a few brave stars push through the haze of city light. The moon is a thin curve, like a fingernail clipping, hung over the Hudson River. The FBI file began the moment Tesla stopped breathing. Agents wrote up reports. Memos passed from desk to desk. Names appeared and disappeared. Theories were typed onto pale yellow paper and stamped with red ink. Some pages had words blacked out before they were even filed. Other pages were simply removed and stored somewhere else, somewhere that did not appear on any list. For decades, families would write to the government asking questions. Scholars would file requests. Reporters would knock on doors. The answer was always the same. The file is sealed. The matter is closed. Come back later. Come back never. Imagine the night clerk inside the warehouse, sitting at a small desk under a single hanging bulb. He sips coffee from a tin cup. A radio plays soft music behind him, some sleepy big band tune. He does not know what is in the boxes stacked along the back wall. He has been told not to ask. He has been told the rent is paid by the government, and that is enough for him. Outside, the wind picks up. It moves down the street like a slow river, carrying the smell of the harbor with it. Salt and oil and old wood. A foghorn sounds far away on the water. The sound rolls between the buildings, low and gentle, and fades into the rooftops. You feel very small under that sky. Small and quiet and somehow safe, the way you feel when a story is being told to you and you know it has not yet reached its end. I think of all the secrets sleeping in this city tonight. Not just Teslas, letters in attic trunks, photographs in shoeboxes, diaries with brass locks. The world is full of pages nobody reads anymore. The FBI file was only one of them, though it was thicker than most and stranger, and stamped with words like classified and confidential and eyes only. Years later, when parts of the file finally came loose into the daylight, the pages would be patchy and pale, like leaves left out in the rain. Whole paragraphs would be inked over in black. Names would be reduced to single letters. Dates would be missing. The questions people had carried for half a century would be answered with new questions, smaller and sharper, like seeds shaken from a dry pod. But that is for another night. Tonight, the file simply rests. The warehouse rests. The city rests around you, breathing its long, slow breath. Somewhere far uptown, a window glows yellow in a tall apartment building, and a person sits up late reading a book. Somewhere a baby cries and is hushed. Somewhere a train rolls north toward Albany, its headlight cutting a white tunnel through the snow. Look up once more at that sliver of moon. Tesla used to watch the moon from his hotel window. He spoke to it sometimes, the way old men speak to old friends. He thought of light and of fields of force and of the great spinning wheel of the heavens above the city. He believed the universe was singing, if only you knew how to listen. Stand here a little longer. Let the cold settle around your shoulders like a soft coat. The street is empty now. The truck has gone. The warehouse waits. The file waits. And the night, kind as it is, keeps every secret it holds. Sava Kasanovic was the one who came for him, not the government, not the lawyers, not the men in dark suits with quiet shoes. A cousin, a man from the old country, with a soft voice and a long coat and a name most Americans could not pronounce. Sava was the son of Tesla's sister Marika. He had grown up hearing stories about his famous uncle in America, the man who tamed lightning and dreamed of free power for every farmhouse on Earth. By 1943, Sava was working in New York as a Yugoslav diplomat. He was the closest family Tesla had left in the city. And when the maid found that still figure in room 3327, Sava was the one they finally called. He came to the Hotel New Yorker in a hurry. The lobby was hushed, the brass fittings gleaming under low yellow lamps. The carpet smelled of old smoke and rose perfume. He took the elevator up, watching the floor numbers climb, his heart climbing with them. By the time he reached the room, the government men had already been there. The papers were already gone. The black trunks were already sealed. Sava stood in the doorway and looked at the bed where his uncle had slept. The pigeons still murmured outside on the window ledge. The curtains moved a little in the cold draft. There was nothing for him to do. There was nothing for him to take. Only a soft, empty space where a giant had once been. In the years that followed, Sava became the keeper of what little remained. He fought gently, patiently, for every notebook the government would release. He wrote letters. He met with officials. He sat in offices with bare wooden chairs and listened to men explain why this paper or that drawing could not yet come home. He never raised his voice. He simply waited the way old country people know how to wait. And slowly, piece by piece, things began to move. Crates left the Manhattan warehouse. Trucks rolled across the docks. A ship sailed for the Adriatic carrying boxes stamped with Tesla's name. The journey took years. Some say it took decades. Some say parts of it are still happening, quietly, in rooms no tourist ever sees. When the boxes finally arrived in Belgrade, the city wept. Not in a loud way, in the slow, steady way that a place weeps for a son who left and never came back alive. They opened a museum for him in a yellow stone house on Krunska Street. They placed his ashes inside a golden sphere, like a small planet, and set the sphere on a pedestal under soft lights. Children came on school trips and stood very still in front of it. Their teachers told them, "That is your uncle too." The story changed how Belgrade saw itself. A city that had been bombed and rebuilt and bombed again now had a quiet patron saint of electricity. His face appeared on the money. His name went on the airport. Streets in small mountain villages bore his initials. In schoolrooms, teachers taught his equations the way other teachers taught psalms. And every year on July 10th, his birthday, the lights of the museum burn a little brighter. People bring flowers. Old women press their palms to the glass case where his death mask rests, plaster white and peaceful. Young engineers come from as far as Tokyo and Buenos Aires to stand in the small back garden and look up at the same sky he once looked at. In his own village of Smiljan, in the rocky hills of what is now Croatia, they rebuilt the house where he was born. A small white church stands beside it, the church where his father once preached. A bronze statue of Tesla sits on a stone bench in the yard, his long legs crossed, a book open on his knee. Tourists sit beside him for photographs. Sheep wander past. The wind off the mountains smells of wild thyme and warm stone. Something grew out of all that loss. A kind of folk pride that belongs only to that corner of the world. They believe in a way Americans never quite learned to believe that he was theirs. That the man who lit up Niagara Falls and dreamed of wireless cities was a boy from a stone cottage in the Velebit Hills, and that his spirit walks those hills still. Sava lived to see some of it, not all of it. He died in 1956, having spent the rest of his life carrying his uncle's name like a candle through a dark hallway, shielding the small flame with his hand. Belgrade sits on two rivers, where the Sava meets the Danube in a slow brown curl. The city has been burned and rebuilt more times than anyone can count. Old stones lean against new ones. Tile roofs slope down toward the water like the backs of sleeping animals. And tucked into a quiet street called Krunska, behind a soft yellow facade with tall white windows, there is a small museum that holds what is left of Nikola Tesla. The building was once a private home. 2 stories, with iron grillwork over the lower windows and a garden that smells of linden trees in summer. You walk up a few stone steps and through a wooden door, and the city sounds fall away. The floors creak. The air feels cool and still, the way the air feels in churches and libraries. This is where the long road ended. The story of how Tesla came here belongs to one man more than any other. His name was Sava Kasanovic, the nephew you met earlier in this tale. After the war, after the trunks and the boxes and the long bureaucratic silence in New York, Sava worked patiently to bring his uncle home. Not the body alone, though the ashes did travel. He wanted the papers, the drawings, the pieces of a mind scattered across a foreign warehouse. It took years. Letters crossed oceans. Officials shrugged. Files moved from one desk to another and back again. But in 1952, nearly a decade after Tesla died in that quiet hotel room, crates began arriving in Belgrade, more than 80 of them. They came by ship and by train, stamped and sealed, carrying the weight of a life. Sava opened them in a room that smelled of dust and old varnish. Inside were notebooks bound in leather, their pages soft from years of handling. There were photographs, glass plates, sketches drawn in a fine slanting hand. There were medals in velvet cases and letters tied with faded ribbon. There was a death mask, pale as candle wax, with the high cheekbones and the closed eyes of the man who once lit the world. The museum opened in 1955. It has been open ever since. You can walk through it today. In the front rooms, you see the inventor as the world wants to remember him. A tall glass case holds one of his famous coils, copper wound tight as a sleeping snake. Models of his motors turn slowly under soft yellow light. Diagrams hang on the walls, showing currents and fields, the invisible rivers he learned to steer. School children come on field trips and press their faces to the glass. Couples wander through on slow Sunday afternoons. In the back, behind a small door, sits the urn. It is shaped like a sphere, made of gold-colored metal, resting on a marble pedestal. This is Tesla, what remains of him, returned at last to the soil of his people. Visitors stand before it and grow quiet without being told to. But if you walk slowly, if you read the little cards beside each display, you begin to notice the empty spaces. A label will mention a notebook from a certain year, and the notebook will not be there. A reference will point to drawings of a particle beam device, and the drawings will be absent. Curators speak carefully when asked. Some materials, they say, were never returned. Some were copied before they left America. Some, perhaps, were never copied at all. The museum holds roughly 160,000 documents. It is a staggering number. And yet the people who have spent their lives studying these papers say the same thing in many languages. Pieces are missing. The story has gaps the size of doorways. Sava himself died in 1956, only a year after the museum opened. He did not live to see what scholars would later find or fail to find among his uncle's things. He carried the story out of New York and across the sea and laid it down here, in this house on Krunska Street, and then he was gone too. The legend traveled with the papers. In Belgrade, children grow up knowing Tesla the way American children know Edison. His face is on the money. His name is on the airport. There is a statue of him sitting in a tall chair, gazing thoughtfully at nothing in a square downtown. But the legend that traveled is not the whole legend. It is the part that survived the crossing. The other part, the locked part, the part that rode away on a truck in Manhattan one cold January, never made it to the yellow house by the linden trees. That part stayed behind, and the empty spaces in the museum are where it should have been. So now we come to the part of the story that has no ending. The part where the trail simply stops, like a path that walks into the fog and never walks back out. Because somewhere between the moment the suits carried those trunks out of the Hotel New Yorker and the moment the Belgrade Museum opened its tidy glass cases, things went missing. Not papers, not letters, not photographs, inventions, whole inventions. Tesla had spent the last 20 years of his life talking about machines the world had never seen. He spoke of them at quiet dinners, in soft hotel rooms, over cups of warm milk. He spoke of a beam that could send power through the empty sky. He spoke of a small device, no larger than a wristwatch, that could pull energy from the air itself. He spoke of engines that ran on cosmic rays, of ships that flew without wings, of a wave that could ring the whole earth like a bell. And then he died. And then the trunks were taken. And then, years later, when the boxes finally crossed the ocean and came to rest under the soft yellow lights of the Belgrade Museum, those inventions were not inside. The drawings were gone. The notebooks that held the math were gone. The small working models he had once shown to reporters with a shy little smile were gone. What remained was the everyday paperwork of a long life. Hotel receipts, letters to friends, speeches he had written for birthdays, the bones of a man, but not the fire. So the question hangs in the air like the smell of rain that never quite falls. Where did the rest go? Some say the truck that left Manhattan carried more than one load. Some say a second truck, Smaller, quieter, peeled off into the night and drove to a place that has no name on any map. A warehouse with no sign. A door with no number. Inside, the story goes, sit wooden crates wrapped in oilcloth, the wax seals still unbroken, waiting in the dark for someone who never comes. Others say the inventions were studied, taken apart, copied into other men's notebooks, and slipped quietly into the bloodstream of a war that needed every clever trick it could find. They point to the radar dishes that bloomed across the coast in the years that followed. They point to the strange aircraft that flew higher than anyone thought possible. They point to projects with code names that even now no one will say out loud. And still others say none of it was ever real. That Tesla, in his final years, was a man who loved his pigeons more than people, who counted his footsteps and would not touch a peach. They say the death ray was a dream, the wireless power was a dream, the engines that ran on starlight were a dream. They say the missing pages are missing because they were never written in the first place. But here is the thing about that theory. It does not explain the silence. It does not explain why the FBI kept the file sealed for half a century. It does not explain why a young officer named Trump wrote his careful little report, and then, somewhere along the way, the report and the trunks stopped matching. It does not explain the empty spaces in the Belgrade cases, the gaps where something used to be. A man who built nothing has nothing worth hiding, and someone hid something, so the door stays open. The lamp in the window stays lit. The story keeps walking, one generation handing it down to the next, the way old neighbors lean over a fence and say, "Did you ever hear about the man in room 3327? Did you ever hear about the trunks? Did you ever hear about the things that came out of his head and then quietly disappeared from the world? Maybe somewhere, in a basement nobody visits, there is a wooden crate with a wax seal. Maybe inside that crate is a small machine no bigger than a loaf of bread. Maybe if you turn the little brass key on the side, the whole room would fill with a soft, humming light, and you would understand, just for a moment, what it felt like to be him. To see the world the way he saw it. A place of invisible rivers and singing wires, of energy flowing through every empty inch of air, free for the taking. Or maybe the crate is empty. Maybe it always was. The mystery does not care which is true. The mystery only asks you to wonder. And wondering, in the end, is the part of Nikola Tesla that no government truck could ever carry away. So the fire has burned down to a soft orange glow, and the wind outside has settled into something gentle, like a hand smoothing a blanket. The story has carried us through hotel hallways and locked safes, through warehouse doors and quiet museums in faraway cities. And here, near the end of it, we come back to the simple shape of a man. Nikola Tesla was 86 years old when he died. He weighed less than a child. His hair had gone white as the snow outside the windows of the New Yorker hotel, and his suits hung on him like sheets on a clothesline. He had no wife. He had no children. He had a few pigeons, a head full of inventions, and a hotel bill he could not pay. That is who he was at the end. Not the wild-eyed wizard of the magazine covers, not the rival of Edison, not the man who once made the lights of a whole world's fair shine like trapped stars. Just an old man in a quiet room, feeding crumbs to birds on a windowsill, dreaming of towers that would never rise. And yet, the moment he closed his eyes for the last time, the world he had stepped away from came rushing back through the door. Men in dark coats, trucks waiting at the curb, hands opening drawers he had kept locked for 40 years. Whatever he had made in the silence of that room, somebody wanted it badly enough to come for it before the bedsheets were cold. That is the strange shape of his ending. A man the world had mostly forgotten, treated in death like a vault full of treasure. A man who had been ignored at lectures, laughed at in newspapers, turned away by investors, suddenly important again the moment he could no longer speak. Picture the city that night, Manhattan under a low gray sky. Snow piled along the curbs in dirty ridges. Steam rising from the grates. The yellow glow of taxi headlights moving slow through the slush. Somewhere in that great breathing city, a truck rolled toward a warehouse with boxes in the back, and inside those boxes were notebooks no one alive could fully read. Picture the hotel room afterward, with the bed stripped and the windows closed, the pigeons gone to other ledges, the curtains hanging still. Picture the empty chair by the window where he used to sit.